I have been going to the Alderton Youth Festival of Music for 31 years. 31 Aprils in that same front row seat, third from the left, the one with the slightly uneven armrest that I stopped minding sometime around 1998. I have heard children play everything from halting scales to the occasional piece of genuine, startling promise. I have watched careers begin and watched well-meaning parents discover, gently, that their child's talent was not quite what they had believed. I have sat through the nerves, the memory slips, the bows that came a quarter second too early, the small proud faces looking out at a hall full of strangers. I thought, after 31 years, that I had seen the shape of every possible afternoon the festival could produce. I was wrong by a considerable margin, and it took a 9-year-old girl in second-hand shoes to prove it. Her name was Wren Allard. I did not know it then. I learned it later from the program I could not throw away, but I know it now the way I know the names of things that have changed me. She came on 11th, after a boy of 14 who played a very creditable Haydn sonata and received the right amount of applause. The stage manager called the next number. There was a pause, and then this child appeared from the left wing. She was small. That is the first thing. Small in the way that makes you recalibrate the scale of everything around her. The Steinway behind her suddenly enormous, the stage itself too wide, the lights too high. She wore a white blouse that had been ironed with great care and a navy skirt that had clearly belonged to someone older. Her shoes were the sensible black shoes of a child whose family bought things to last, not to impress. She carried a music case that was almost as tall as she was, and she held it with both hands, and she walked to the center of the stage with the careful deliberateness of someone who had rehearsed the walk as much as the music. The festival director, Aldous Pemberton, was seated at the adjudicator's table below the stage lip, 3 meters from where I sat. He was 60-something, silver-haired, and had been running this festival for 19 years. He knew the applicant list by heart. He looked up from his notes when Wren appeared, and I watched him do the calculation, the size of her, the case, the shoes, and I watched the decision form on his face before she had taken 3 steps. He leaned to his deputy, a younger woman named Cresswell, and he said it quietly, but the hall had settled between performers, and the acoustics of Alderton Civic Hall have always been unkind to private remarks. "She can't even reach the keys properly," he said. "We'll give her a moment and move on." He said it without malice. That is the thing I have turned over since. He said it as a practical observation, a logistical note, the kind of thing a festival director says when the day is long and the schedule is tight. He was not trying to be cruel. He simply could not imagine that the small child walking toward the Steinway was going to require his full attention. Wren reached the piano bench. She set her music case on the floor, opened it, and placed her sheet music on the stand. Then she looked at the bench. It was set for the previous player, the 14-year-old Haydn boy, a full head taller than her. She looked at it for a moment. She did not ask for help. She found the adjustment lever herself, worked it with both hands, and lowered the bench to where she needed it. The sound of the mechanism, a small, deliberate click, was the only sound in the hall. I noticed then that the hall had gone quiet in the particular way it goes quiet when something unexpected is happening, and no one yet knows what to make of it. Not the formal quiet of an audience waiting for music. The held breath quiet of people who have noticed something, and are not yet sure why. Wren sat down. She placed her feet. They did not reach the floor. She was using the edge of the bench for support, and she positioned her hands above the keys. She did not look at the adjudicator's table. She did not look at the audience. She looked at the piano in the way that I have only ever seen serious musicians look at it, which is not really looking at it at all but looking through it, or inward, settling something interior before the sound begins. Pemberton clicked his pen. Wren played. The opening chord of the Rachmaninoff Prelude in C-sharp minor is one of the most recognizable sounds in the piano repertoire. 3 notes in the bass, a sonorous, tolling dark chord that the composer wrote when he was 19 years old, and that has stopped rooms cold for well over a century. I have heard it played by students at this festival perhaps a dozen times over the years. I have heard it played competently, earnestly, occasionally well. I have never heard it played the way this 9-year-old child played it. It was not the note itself. It was the weight of it, the decision behind it. She did not strike the chord, she placed it, deliberately and without apology, into the silence of the hall, and she let it ring, and she held the sustained pedal exactly as long as a musician holds it who understands what the chord is for, which is not decoration, which is a statement, which says, I am here. Listen. Pemberton's pen went still. Cresswell beside him turned her head. I gripped the program in my lap. I had been half reading it while the bench was being adjusted, and I set it down on my knee and did not touch it again. The prelude moves in 3 voices, and the challenge for any young player is keeping them distinct: the tolling bass, the middle voice that carries the melody, the upper figures that circle above. Most students collapse the voices into a general wash of sound. Wren kept them as separate and clear as 3 people speaking in a room. The bass tolled, the melody sang, the upper figures circled. And underneath all of it was something I can only describe as gravity, a sense that the music weighed what it was supposed to weigh, that she understood not just the notes, but the sorrow the notes were carrying. 3 rows behind me, I heard a man clear his throat and not speak. To my left, a woman who had been whispering to the person beside her stopped mid-sentence and did not finish it. The prelude builds and then subsides, returns to the tolling dark opening and closes, not triumphantly but gravely, like a door being closed with care. Wren played the final chord, held it, released the pedal. The decay of the sound in that hall, the last shimmer of it fading into the wood and the plaster, lasted 4 full seconds. Nobody moved. Pemberton was looking at his hands. Wren turned a page of her music. She had more to play. I did not know what was coming because what was on that second page was not on the program. The program listed only the Rachmaninoff. What she played next had no name I recognized, no composer I could place. It was her own. I did not know that then. I would learn it later. But I knew from the first 8 bars that it was not borrowed. It moved differently from borrowed music. It had the hesitations and the certainties of something made by the person playing it. A melody in the right hand that was simple and unguarded, almost like a question. And beneath it, a left hand that kept building patiently, gathering, until the 2 hands were no longer a melody and an accompaniment, but something woven together, inseparable, a single statement made of 2 voices that needed each other to be complete. I am a retired schoolmaster. I taught history, and for 20 years ran a music appreciation elective that nobody was required to take, and that was always full. I have spent my life trying to explain to young people why music matters, why the impulse to make organized sound out of silence is one of the things that most distinctly marks our kind, why it carries things that words cannot carry and holds things that time otherwise erodes. I have made this argument in classrooms for 31 years. Sitting in that third left front seat in Alderton Civic Hall, I felt the argument being made without words, by a 9-year-old child who had written something I could not adequately describe to anyone who had not been present. There are moments that reorganize you. You do not know they are happening while they happen. You only know afterward when you try to return to who you were before and find that the path has altered. The final note of Wren's composition was a single high note, the right hand alone, a clear, simple tone that she let ring until it faded entirely on its own. She did not rush it. She sat with her hands in her lap and let the silence come back, and then she let the silence settle, and then she stood, and she turned to face the hall. 300 people stood up. It did not happen all at once. It happened the way a tide comes in, one person near the back, then a row, then the sound of chairs, then it was simply everyone on their feet, and the sound of it filled the hall, and someone was calling out, and someone was crying. I could hear it. A woman 2 rows behind, and I was standing, my program fallen to the floor, my hands making the sound they were making without my quite having decided to begin. Wren stood at the edge of the stage with her hands at her sides, looking at the hall, and her expression was not the expression of triumph. It was the expression of someone who has said the thing they needed to say and is waiting quietly to see if it landed. It had landed. I looked at the adjudicator's table. Cresswell was already on her feet, applauding. The third adjudicator, a man whose name I never learned, was on his feet as well, and he was shaking his head slowly, not in negation but in the particular way that means a person is being asked to hold more than they expected to hold. Aldous Pemberton was the last. He rose from his chair the way a man rises when he has been corrected by something larger than himself, and he knows it, and he is not trying to pretend otherwise. Slowly, without theater, he stood at the adjudicator's table and he brought his hands together and he applauded with the full sincerity of a man who has spent 19 years of his life in the service of music and has just been reminded what that service is actually for. He did not say anything, not then. I do not know what he said to Wren afterward in the side room where the adjudicators speak to the performers. I have imagined it often, but I will not invent it here. What I know is what I saw from the third from the left seat in the front row. A man who had looked at a child and decided, before she played a note, what she was and was not. And I know what the music did to that decision. I found her name in the program later when I picked it up from the floor. Wren Allard, age 9, unaffiliated, which means she had no academy, no conservatoire, no teacher's name in the bracket where teachers' names go. Just her name and her age and the piece she had declared. Rachmaninoff Prelude in C-sharp minor, Op. 3 No. 2. The second piece was not listed at all. I suppose she had not told them about the second piece. I have been going to that festival for 31 years. I held the program for a long time in that empty hall after everyone had filed out, and I thought about all the afternoons I had sat in that seat, and all the young players I had watched and what it is, exactly, that you are waiting for when you return year after year to the same creaking armrest, the same program, the same smell of old wood and fresh flowers. I could not have named it before that afternoon. I can name it now. You are waiting for the moment when the music reminds you that you did not already know the shape of everything. Wren Allard was 9 years old and her shoes were second-hand, and she lowered the bench herself, and she played, and that was the shape of the thing I had been waiting for. I have not needed to put it more precisely than that. 31 years, and it came in 9 minutes, and I have not lost a note of it since.